we'll start with this. Well, on the heels of her decision loss this past weekend to undisputed lightweight champion Katie Taylor, Kazakhstan's own Firuza Sharipova posted this by way of her Instagram account. It reads, "Friends, the most likely opponent for my next fight has been determined. We spoke with my manager and determined that we are interested in 2 fights, rematch with Katie Taylor and Sofia Ochigava. It's understandable that Katie Taylor wouldn't agree to a rematch now. In the spring, she will play free-handed against Amanda Serrano. At this time, I am planning to rematch Sofia Ochigava. An agreement has already been reached, and we agreed with her on fair refereeing. I choose 2 judges and 2 she. This is the most likely fight in the near future, but a lot of work still needs to be done to organize it. Sofia holds a WBC silver belt, making her a mandatory contender for Taylor's defense. And if I win that title, I will officially fight Katie again. We are now open to any suggestions, but I don't want to settle. We are planning to make a big fight in the spring." And this isn't the first time that a Sharipova versus Ochigava rematch.
I think they've been trying to do this fight for over a year.
Sharipova versus Ochigava II, their rematch. We've been hearing off and on about a potential sequel to their initial meeting, which took place years ago, and when it did, Sofia gave Firuza her first professional loss.
I've been hearing about those 2 fighting again for some time.
So they've never been able to get that sequel, that second fight, over the line. Perhaps they will this time, sometime next year in the spring. Given how Sofia's professional career is going, you know, she's not the professional that she was the amateur. As an amateur, she had some hell of a fucking record, but as a professional,
She hasn't had that same kind of success.
at least not yet, and with a pro record of only 5 professional bouts, having fought only once this year, the clock is ticking.
It's not saying that Sofia's too old to make something big happen, but she needs to get going.
Strange dynamic between Firuza and Sofia, because even though they fought before, they're actually friends, and it just so happens that Sofia helped Firuza prepare for this past weekend's Katie Taylor fight. Now what they're talking about doing is fighting each other. Firuza wants...
She wants what Sofia's got.
Because what Sofia's got could help Firuza get that Katie Taylor fight, that Katie Taylor rematch. She wants Sofia's WBC silver title. And as you guys saw this past Saturday, it's what I've been telling you. Firuza Sharipova is a capable boxer. She just needs more experience. Given that she's 7 years younger than Sofia Ochigava, and she is capable, it's conceivable that she could avenge the loss. She could win the rematch with Sofia Ochigava in spring of next year if they manage to get that fight over the line.
So I don't think getting a Taylor rematch is as simple as procuring the silver belt.
The WBC silver title. And as Firuza herself specified, next year Katie's supposed to be fighting Amanda Serrano in their long-awaited, long-anticipated showdown. That Amanda Serrano fight could end up being a 2-fight engagement if Amanda upsets the apple cart for Katie, or if the fight is close but Katie wins the fight. I could see it turning out to be a 2-fight engagement. I could see 2 fights happening between them. That's possible. There is that to consider. And then there is the winner of Cameron versus Kaylee Rice. That is yet another potential opponent option for Katie Taylor, even if the Amanda Serrano fight doesn't end up being a 2-fight engagement. Perhaps Katie Taylor will challenge the winner of Cameron versus Rice for the undisputed crown at 140 pounds, or maybe she moves up to 147, takes on Jessica McCaskill for a second time for her undisputed titles, her undisputed crown in the welterweight division.
Right now, there are 2 or 3 girls that might be ahead of Firuza in the queue.
Amanda, Jessica, and the winner of Kaylee Rice versus Chantel Cameron. So listen, even if they manage to get Sharipova versus Ochigava II over the line, and even if Firuza Sharipova wins that fight and procures that WBC silver title, even if that happens, there's no guarantees that she faces Katie for a second time next year. We'll see. Firuza's capable. You saw that this past Saturday. She was able to make Katie Taylor work for it round by round. But because boxing matches are scored round by round, and Katie Taylor is effectively edging her out in a lot of situations, edging her out in the exchange, edging her out in speed, and accumulating rounds while she's doing so, the most I could give Firuza on my scorecard were 2, maybe 3 rounds.
It's one of those fights where Katie didn't have it all her way.
She didn't, but she did win more rounds than Firuza. She did win more rounds, and that's what she's supposed to do.
Even if she's just edging out Firuza in some of those rounds.
You do that enough times, you end up accumulating more rounds, and accumulating more rounds is the name of the game.
That's That's what'll win you the fight.
When Katie the fight this past weekend, a performance that didn't exactly ooze with wow factor.
I saw Katie Taylor landing cleaner shots more often than Firuza.
And in the early goings of the fight, the edge and speed and who was beating who to the punch, well, that much was obvious. I'll say Firuza looked capable. She didn't look out of place. She didn't look out of her depth.
She just fell short of the mark with Katie.
Though fighting Katie Taylor on that stage, that helped to enhance Firuza's profile in the West. Now that people have seen her, they know what she's capable of. They know what she can do. Let's see if she can't get that Sofia Ochigava rematch next year, and let's see if she can't win that WBC silver title. Moving on. Yesterday, news broke that Amir Khan and Kell Brook's grudge match, set to go down early next year, has officially sold out, and it only took 10 minutes to do so. And this confirms what I've been telling you guys all along. This confirms what I've been telling you since that fight resurfaced as a hot topic, a talking point, that for all the moaning and groaning you see online, you see on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, that the fight is past the sell-by date.
But Amir Khan and Kell Brook are past it and over the hill.
Yeah, maybe they are, but people are still going to want to know what happens. They're still going to want to know how their saga, their grudge match ends. And, you know, social media is a funny thing. You can find any number of opinionated assholes on Twitter, here on YouTube, and Instagram, and Facebook, but all of the boxing community isn't on social media. Hell, sometimes the guys you see on social media, they're not even paying customers.
Those mutants you see hyping up PBC pay-per-views.
Those guys you see talking up Gervonta Davis's fights, his pay-per-views. You think those guys are paying customers. You think those guys are buying those pay-per-views, all of them.
His and all those other PBC fights.
And all those other PBC pay-per-views, I can tell you, they're not. They're not buying those fights, regardless of what you see on social media, which sometimes misrepresents the actual interest in terms of dollars and cents.
You can find any number of people talking about a fight online, but how many of those people actually bought it?
You think about Amir Khan versus Kell Brook, their grudge match, and it's a grudge match that, believe it or not, it's not a tough sell because you don't need a world title to sell it. And even though these guys' best days are behind them, maybe they are over the hill in some ways.
Their rivalry is still intact, and that's the selling point.
They're in a similar place in their careers, but the selling point is the bad blood between them. Thus, they're on even terrain. They're on an even playing field. You saw a lot of moaning and groaning online when the fight was on the eve of being announced, but for all that belly aching, it sold out in just 10 minutes because it's what I always told you.
Sky Sports has got 2 pay-per-views coming up early next year.
It feels like in 2022, early next year, they're going to get off to a good start with Amir Khan versus Kell Brook and Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Williams. Liam Williams, who has since parted ways with Dominic Engel.
He's with Adam Booth now for this fight.
Clarissa Shields is going to be making her Sky box office debut on that card. Keep your eyes peeled for that. Sky's off to a good start, or at least they will be. Do I think that Eddie Hearn is kicking himself that he didn't pick up this fight? Not really. I mean, he seems to be doing fine. He drew a rather large crowd with that Smith versus Fowler fight earlier this year. This past weekend, there seemed to be a good sized number of people in attendance for that Ben versus Algieri card. It's not a situation to where Eddie Hearn is missing out and he's struggling to put on fights or struggling to sell tickets. It's just a more competitive market than it was before Matchroom and Sky parted ways. There is that much more to choose from.
It's really not a bad thing, though.
Keep your eyes peeled for Khan versus Brook early next year. In other news, unified bantamweight champion Naoya Inoue knocked out Aaron Dipaen in round 8 to defend his WBA and IBF bantamweight titles. Inoue's rival WBO champion Jonriel Casimero live-streamed the pay-per-view on his YouTube channel, not seen that before, per a tweet from Michael Benson. And Jonriel Casimero was actually providing a public service because Naoya Inoue's fight didn't have a U.S. broadcast partner. In spite of Naoya...
And he's still a top-ranked fighter?
Naoya Inoue's fight was not shown on ESPN or ESPN+. It wasn't available.
Top Rank's fucking up.
The saving grace is that this wasn't a big fight for Naoya Inoue. The saving grace is that for the unified bantamweight champion, he was just going through the motions, playing with his food and battering this guy.
Oh, it is a pleasure to watch him in action.
Oh, it definitely is. He's a quality operator. But the beating that he put on Aaron Dipaen isn't dissimilar from the beating that we saw him put on Michael Dasmariñas here stateside as part of a top-ranked promotion. I can't say that Naoya Inoue has gotten much of anything out of his relationship with Bob Arum and Top Rank, though I can't wholeheartedly say that a bantamweight here in America where they don't characteristically watch the lower weights.
A bantamweight's a tough sell in America, any way you slice it.
Let alone a Japanese one. Even if he is a high-quality fighter, quality operator like Inoue, a Japanese one with a language barrier in a country that doesn't characteristically watch the lower weights. I mean, Americans...
They're pretty much ignorant to anything past 135 pounds.
Let alone 118 pounds. Most Americans, they're not familiar with most of the lightweights, let alone the bantamweights. That's the issue.
At least a big part of it.
Top Rank dropped the ball, and you will have heard me say this before, many times before, that Top Rank, when they decided to get into the Naoya Inoue business, they should have secured him opponents as well, the opponents he would need to become this division's undisputed champion before the eyes of their audience, the audience they cater to, the American audience, so that they can stage the high-quality fights, the high-quality matchups as part of their ESPN broadcasts, and they didn't do that. When the WBC ordered the then-reigning WBC champion, bantamweight, Nordine Ubali, to lock horns with former champion Nonito Donaire, Top Rank didn't do anything to get that fight. They didn't put a bid in. The sole bidder for that match was PBC's own Tom Brown. We know that before the pandemic shut everything down, Top Rank was trying to do a unification match with Naoya Inoue and Jonriel Casimero, but that unification match got scrapped as a result of the pandemic, and I understand that, I do.
We're extenuating circumstances.
But when you try and surmise what it is exactly that Naoya Inoue got out of forging that relationship with them, forging that relationship with Top Rank, it doesn't amount to very much. I understand they tried to do the Jonriel Casimero unification match, but I also understand that they didn't lift a finger to try and secure that Ubali versus Donaire fight. They did absolutely nothing.
They should have known the winner of that fight would be a person of interest to Naoya Inoue.
Regardless of who it was, and a lot has happened since then. The green belt has changed hands. It has gone to Nonito Donaire, who viciously knocked out unbeaten Nordine Ubali, very recently defended the title against Raymar Caballo, viciously knocked him out as well. That was last week.
The silver lining is Nonito Donaire is looking to unify.
The silver lining is that unification matches, they can still happen. At least one unification match between Nonito Donaire, who's looking to run it back, with Naoya Inoue, that is feasible. It's a genuine possibility. Nonito, who's still with his longtime guy, Richard Schaefer, who has since started his own promotional company, Pro Bellum. Nonito Donaire is a Pro Bellum fighter.
Where does that leave Jonriel Casimero?
I really don't know. Last I checked, the WBO sent him a show cause letter to substantiate why he was unable to defend his title against his mandatory challenger, Paul Butler. Don't know how that cookie's gonna crumble, but if they don't like his story, the title could change hands.
He might get stripped.
If he already isn't by the time that this video is uploaded. Top Rank hasn't been able to do a heck of a lot for Naoya Inoue, and if I'm being honest, a unification match between two bantamweight champions like Inoue and Donaire, their rematch, the home for that fight really isn't here stateside. The audience for it, I should say. That fight is best suited to go down over there in the land of the rising sun, the Far East.
Just being honest, I don't see what Top Rank fits into that picture.
That fight is a very big fight over there in Japan, bigger than it would be here. The most the Top Rank can do is stream it by way of ESPN Plus for an American audience.
Other than that, they're not needed.
Finally, per tweet from Chris Mannix, Daniel Jacobs, John Ryder are in advanced negotiations to face each other in early 2022, sources told Sports Illustrated. Now, Jacobs hasn't fought since a narrow decision win over Gabe Rosado in November of 2020. Ryder has won 2 straight since a disputed decision defeat to Callum Smith last year. And I'm not at all surprised to see that Danny is back on the Matchroom side of things, because that's what I told you would happen.
What I said would happen when things fell apart with Joe.
Joe Smith Jr. had a 2-fight plan. He was supposed to fight his mandatory challenger, Umar Salamov. Then early next year, he was supposed to face Daniel Jacobs at Madison Square Garden in New York. But all of that...
Joe caught COVID and that 2-fight plan got scrapped.
Umar Salamov ended up fighting Dmitry Bivol for his WBA title. That was this past weekend. He was outpointed by Dmitry Bivol. And Daniel Jacobs, he was left out in the cold. Joe Smith Jr., he's got a new 2-fight plan. He's supposed to be fighting Callum Johnson, and if he beats him, he's supposed to be fighting Anthony Yarde. So where did that leave Daniel Jacobs? It left him fighting John Ryder. Having not fought since November of 2020, Daniel Jacobs squandered all of this year, and that was unwise. It would have behooved him to get out there against somebody. anybody ahead of a fight with a guy like John Ryder, who can be a handful.
I don't know if the fight's at super middleweight or light heavyweight, but I don't think it matters.
Because what I think Daniel is angling towards, is a light heavyweight campaign, where the Joe Smith Jr. title fight would have taken place early next year. I get the sense that if Daniel beats John, they might move him into a Callum Smith fight. And if he beats Callum Smith, they might then move him into a Dimitri Bivol fight. Though, in order for all of that to happen, he's got to make it past John. And I don't know with any certainty that he does. He has since...
He's back with Andre Rosier,
his longtime trainer. They separated for a little while, separated for a bit, but now they're back together. And he's going to need Andre's expertise in his corner, because John Ryder, he ain't no joke and he ain't no slouch, especially for a guy that hasn't fought since November of 2020. If this fight goes down sometime next year, it will have been over a year since Daniel Jacobs fought with anybody, and the last time he fought, he didn't look at all inspired. Whereas John saw action very recently, this past September, in Bulgaria against Joseph Jerko on the undercard of Hrgovic versus Radonjic, and that was this past September. Ryder versus Jerko. That wasn't at super middleweight. That was a light heavyweight contest. And with those things in mind, I get the sense that Jacobs versus Ryder, that might be a light heavyweight contest as well. I was right to assume that the door wasn't closed for Daniel Jacobs over there at Matchroom. They had other opportunities for him. Daniel Jacobs having already fought the big fish, Canelo Alvarez. He fought him at middleweight in what was a unification match between them. I didn't get the sense that Daniel was angling for a title at 168 pounds. Not really, especially not now that Canelo Alvarez has all of them. Daniel has to know he's not likely to get a rematch, so he's dipping his toe in the pool at 175 pounds, light heavyweight. And they're making him earn his money.
They got opportunities for him over there, but he ain't on easy street.
You can't go in there with John Ryder looking the way that you looked against Gabriel Rosado.
You better wake up.